I remember the first moment something felt off. It wasn't dramatic, just a sound I didn't expect. Our golden retriever Rusty let out this low, steady growl, not the playful kind he made with the kids, but something deeper, focused, like he knew something we didn't. He was staring at a spot near the porch, just staring like he was waiting for something to move. We'd only been there a few hours. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury, and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Mia Lawson. I'm 42 now, but this started when I was 36. My husband Cole and I had just moved with our kids to a small town outside Sacramento. We were trying to start over. Nothing dramatic had happened, just the slow wear of city life. Traffic rent no space. We wanted quiet. A yard. Somewhere the kids could grow up with scraped knees and sleepovers, not honking horns and apartment rules. We bought a 1950s Cape Cod with a sagging porch and an overgrown backyard. The kind of place people call a fixer-upper, which is just a nice way of saying it needed more work than we realized. But it had charm, a wide front window, a treehouse the kids fell in love with, and a quarter-acre lot which felt huge to us. Lily was 10. Max had just turned 8. They bolted out of the rental truck before we'd even unhooked the ramp. Lily was swinging a strand of battery-powered fairy lights, already talking about stringing them in the treehouse. Max had a popsicle in one hand and a box of Legos in the other. Rusty jumped out behind them and made a beeline for the backyard claws skittering across cracked concrete. Cole and I paused just a second longer. I remember bumping knuckles with him across the truck bench and saying, "Last house we'll ever buy." Half a joke, half a prayer. That first day was hot. Dry heat, mid-90s. The kind that makes grass crunch under your shoes. We unloaded what we could. Cole took the garage, dreaming up his workshop. I scoped out the dormer window upstairs, imagining a real estate desk for client Zooms. It all felt hopeful. Like maybe this time we'd landed somewhere that would stick. Around mid-afternoon, Lily called us out to take a family picture in the backyard. Rusty, always impatient, was pacing near the porch. His nose was low to the ground, focused on this one soft patch of turf. When Cole walked over, Rusty let out a whine and scratched at the dirt. Cole waved it off. "Probably raccoons," he said. We laughed, posed for the photo-grilled hot dogs on the old charcoal pit someone left behind. That night, after the kids went to bed, a neighbor stopped by, tall, man-silver hair, carried a glass pie dish like something out of a storybook. Malcolm Delacqua. Said he'd lived on the court 35 years. Taught art at the local elementary school before retiring. Spoke softly warm voice. He stayed for a few minutes, told us our kids would love the neighborhood. Said by August, they'd own the whole cul-de-sac. It rained that night. Just a soft drizzle. Nothing unusual. Around midnight, I thought I heard Rusty's nails clicking across the floor, but I didn't get up. Next morning, the kids were already in the backyard before I'd finished pouring coffee. Lily was the first to say something. Mom, she called Rusty, dug a hole. I stepped out onto the deck. The backyard smelled like wet dirt and dog fur. Right where he'd been scratching yesterday, there was now a shallow pit, about the width of his shoulders. The edges were uneven, clumped like someone had been digging in a hurry. Max had already run to the garage for plastic shovels. Lily swore it was pirate gold. I told them not before breakfast. But that hole, that patch of earth stayed in my mind all day. I don't know why. It was just dirt. But something about it felt wrong. That evening, just after the sun dipped behind the garage, Rusty started whining again. Same spot, same stance. And that time, I noticed it too. The way the grass dipped, the way the air around it felt. Heavier. I told Cole I'd check it in the morning, but that night I didn't sleep well. Because for the first time since moving in, I didn't feel safe. And I couldn't explain why. Rusty's digging wasn't just curiosity anymore. That hole in the backyard, the one we thought was just a raccoon's work, turned into something none of us could have prepared for. I still remember the moment Max's plastic shovel struck something hard beneath the soil. At first it was just a dull clang, a strange sound that made us stop and look. Then Lily knelt down, her hands digging faster as a loop of black nylon emerged from the dirt. It wasn't until the shoe's heel surfaced its rotted leather and tangled laces that the weight of what we found sank in. A child's shoe still attached to brittle bones that peeked from the earth. Lily screamed, the sound ripping through the warm afternoon air, while Rusty barked frantically as if trying to warn us to back away. I pulled the kids back my own shoes, coated in the thick mud, my heart pounding like I was running when I was only standing still. I called Cole, voice trembling but steady, and the police were on the way. Within minutes, the quiet cul-de-sac had erupted into chaos. Sirens, flashing lights, and officers flooded the street. Detective Ellen Harper arrived, a woman who carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too many things like this, but still fought with everything she had. She moved quickly, her gaze sharp beneath tired eyes, assessing the scene as forensic technicians swarmed the pit Rusty had uncovered. Inside the excavation tent, Dr. Raoul Valls handled the remains with the care of a surgeon. He held a child-sized sneaker and a mud-caked pink backpack with a cartoon unicorn face, the zipper half-open, water dripping like tears from the fabric. No labels, no names, just the chilling proof that a child had been buried here, hidden in plain sight for years. Harper told us the bones had likely been there at least a decade, and the city was about to confront a cold case it had long forgotten. The house that had promised a fresh start was now a controlled crime scene with police tape cutting off our front yard. I could see the fear in Cole's eyes as he paced, phone glued to his ear. The buyers and sellers we worked with had already backed away, leaving us with a home that couldn't be sold. A dream turned nightmare. Lily clung to Rusty, who shivered like he knew the weight of what had been uncovered. Harper knelt beside her, asking gentle questions. "What did Rusty do last night? Where exactly had he dug?" Lily answered with a maturity beyond her years, recalling the dog's growls near the porch steps. It was clear we had stumbled into something that stretched beyond our small family into the dark corners of the past. At the precinct, Harper pulled out old case files from 2009, photographs and missing person reports, faded memories of a young girl named Malene Brooks. 10 years old when she vanished from a riverside park. Her disappearance had left a scar on the community, but one that time had dulled. Harper's fingers traced the chipped tooth and sun hat in Malene's photo, and I could almost feel her loss in the cold fluorescent light of the bullpen. The initial lab results came back with a mitochondrial DNA match. The bones in our yard were hers. The news hit hard, rippling through the town, and the media forcing officials to acknowledge a failure to protect one of their own. Mayor's polling nosedived. The case became a political minefield, but Harper refused to let it be swept under the rug again. Back home, the neighbors' voices were hushed, but their eyes were sharp. Rumors floated like leaves on the wind, some saying the previous owners had ignored the past, others whispering about the retired teacher next door. Malcolm Delacqua, a man with a kind smile and a long history in the neighborhood. Children recalled warm afternoons in his kitchen stories of after-school art lessons and tutoring, but there was a tension beneath his easy manner that didn't sit right. Rusty's growls at the fence between our yards were growing louder, more persistent. Lily began keeping a notebook, noting every time Rusty barked or whimpered, every odd moment that felt out of place. The quiet in the cul-de-sac was starting to crack. One night, the porch camera was tampered with, clicking on and off like a silent warning. Then came the cigarette butts, 3 brown filters left like breadcrumbs near the hole. Harper collected the evidence, her face grim. The filters had plastic tips, cheap Turkish cigarettes, the kind you don't find everywhere, deliberate, calculated contamination. It wasn't just a tragic accident or an old burial. It was something darker, something planned. That's when things shifted. Lily and Max found a loose fence slat leading to Delacroix's yard. Rusty vanished through it, barking at the far corner near a shed that had always seemed off-limits. Inside, beneath years of dust and stale air, they uncovered a box filled with disturbing trophies. Baby teeth sealed in plastic bags, hair ribbons tied neatly to index cards, bicycle license plates bent and labeled with initials and dates stretching back nearly 2 decades. One ribbon bore the initials MB, matching Malene Brooks. The reality settled like a stone in my stomach. This was no random crime scene. It was a carefully curated collection. Someone had been keeping these relics of lost children for years. Harper moved quickly, getting warrants and deploying surveillance. Footage soon revealed Delacroix meeting with a second man, Grant Wilder, a local real estate agent known for flipping houses fast. The pattern was chilling. Wilder found the homes bought and sold with ruthless speed. Delacroix curated the trophies. It was a grotesque partnership hiding in plain sight, an evil buried beneath suburban lawns and freshly painted porches. I could see the weight of the investigation settling on Harper's shoulders, the pressure of finally facing a case that had haunted her career. We stayed inside those days, the backyard fenced off and flooded with harsh crime scene lights. Rusty wouldn't stop pacing, growling at the fence, watching shadows where no one else saw. And through it all, I wondered how many secrets a quiet neighborhood could hold, how many buried truths waited beneath the grass where children once played and vanished without a trace. The calm was gone. The quiet street had become a reminder that darkness could live right next door. When the news broke that the remains belonged to Malene Brooks, everything changed, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no collective moment of reckoning. No flood of community memory, just headlines followed by silence. The neighborhood kept its blinds drawn, and most folks nodded politely without saying anything at all. Cole lost 2 design contracts the same week. I had 3 potential buyers back out even before the investigation shut everything down. The house we'd hoped would bring us stability had turned into something people whispered about in grocery store aisles and church parking lots. And the longer the tape stayed up around our yard, the more people seemed to treat us like we were part of the story too. Not witnesses, not victims, just a complication. I started noticing the shift when Lily and Max came home from school that Monday. Max didn't say much, just dropped his backpack and went straight to his room. Lily tried to act like nothing was wrong, but when I checked her tablet that night, she'd been searching what does forensic mean and what happens when kids find bones. She was 10. She shouldn't have to know those words yet. I tried asking if anything happened at school. She said it was fine, just weird, but the way she said it made my stomach twist. Cole and I agreed to keep things normal at home, no late-night news, no questions we couldn't answer. But we couldn't shield them from everything, not when they were the ones who found her. Detective Harper stayed in touch. Not daily, but often enough. She had this quiet way of talking that made you feel like she heard everything, even what you didn't say out loud. One evening, she stopped by to drop off a copy of the field report and mentioned that the house had no history of permits for landscaping or excavation, which meant whoever buried Malene did it in secret under the cover of night and likely knew no one would notice. She asked again about the previous owners, but we'd bought the place through a county auction. No disclosures, no forwarding contacts. Just a chain of title and a lockbox key. Still, the deeper she dug, the more she realized Malene's case had gone cold for reasons that didn't make sense. Records were incomplete. Witnesses hadn't been re-interviewed. A few pages were missing entirely from the original case file. Harper didn't say the word, but I could tell she suspected it had been mishandled. A few days later, Lily came downstairs with her notebook. She'd been tracking every time Rusty barked where he stood and which direction he faced. She'd drawn a little map of our yard with red X's and timestamps. I didn't think much of it until I saw one entry repeated. Growled at Mr. Delacroix. 9:04 p.m. Then again the next night. And the next. At first I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. But Rusty's posture changed every time the man walked by, ears forward, tail-stiff hackles raised. Not fear, not aggression either. Just this alert, focused presence like he knew something we didn't. Mr. Delacqua had always been friendly. He brought over pie that first night, talked about teaching art at the elementary school, how he missed the kids. He seemed like one of those older neighbors who'd lived on the block forever. But when I mentioned to Harper that Rusty seemed fixated on the fence we shared with him, she didn't dismiss it. She asked if we'd noticed anything else: unusual deliveries, late-night movements, lights at strange hours. I hadn't. Not then. That changed the following week. Around midnight, the porch camera blinked off, then back on, then off again. The kids were asleep. Cole and I were reading in bed. When we checked the live feed, nothing looked out of place, just the dark backyard, still and quiet. But Rusty was already at the sliding door, low, whining, tail stiff. Cole stepped outside with a flashlight, scanned the fence line. Nothing moved. But the next morning, right by the edge of the garden, he found 3 cigarette butts in a tight row. They weren't ours. No one we knew smoked. He zipped them into a sandwich bag and texted Harper. She showed up before sunrise, hair pulled back, boots wet from the grass. She examined the filters and muttered something about plastic tips and cellulose, cheap generic, not the kind you'd buy at a regular store. No saliva trace, she said. Someone doesn't want to leave a trail. She didn't say it out loud, but I could tell someone had been watching. A few days later, Harper returned to speak with Lily again. This time, it was about the porch light and whether she remembered anything unusual the night Rusty first dug. Lily told her it had rained, that she heard claws on the door, and that when she opened it, Rusty ran out fast. She didn't follow. But later she saw him digging like crazy under the porch steps. That detail made Harper pause. She said nothing right away, but I saw her mark something on her notepad. Meanwhile, the press circled. Not openly, not in our yard, but we'd spot them at the end of the block, idling in vans, zoom lenses angled toward our house. A drone flew over one afternoon. Harper had to yell at the operator to pull back. The captain issued a gag order on details, which only made the headlines worse. Local reporters guessed wildly. Some blamed the previous owners. Others questioned the timeline. None of it helped. One afternoon, I was standing in the kitchen when Lily ran in with her tablet. She and Max had been digging through archived photos from the 2009 Literacy Fair, the one Malene had attended the week she vanished. On the second page of image results, they found a volunteer group shot. And right in the center was Malene, smiling shyly, her pink backpack looped across her front. Just over her left shoulder was a familiar figure. Tall, silver-haired, smiling, one hand resting comfortably behind her. Mr. Delacqua. We stared at that photo a long time. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was the first time I realized just how close this story might be to us, and how long someone may have been hiding in plain sight. After we found that photo of Malene Brooks standing beside Malcolm Delacqua, something in the house shifted. Not physically, just the air, the weight of it. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before, like the way Delacqua's curtains never fully opened even on bright days, or how he always seemed to walk past the same section of our fence right around dusk, hands in his pockets, chin tucked low. It stopped feeling like coincidence. Lily kept up with her notebook, drawing little maps with timestamps and circles where Rusty barked or paced. Some nights I'd find her sitting by the back slider in her pajamas, just watching. She'd write one sentence close the notebook, then slip it back under her pillow like it was something she wasn't supposed to be keeping. Cole started sleeping less. Every creak in the house made him sit up. He moved his desk to the garage, but even that didn't give him peace. The calls stopped coming in. Clients pulled out before even hearing his pitch. And I'd wake up to see him scrolling through job boards at 2 a.m, not saying anything. One night he asked, not bitter, just quiet, What happens if nobody wants to buy a house from people who live next to a crime scene? I didn't have an answer. The kids still had school and Rusty still needed walks. But everything else in our life narrowed down to that 1 yard and the hole in it. Harper was doing what she could, but you could tell the pressure was closing in. Political deadlines, press heat, upper brass, watching her every move. She kept her updates short. Sometimes she'd just send a text, lab running samples. Call you if anything hits. I'd see her car a few streets over, parked in the shade. Her window, cracked eyes scanning the court like she was waiting for something to surface. And in a way, she was. One night, she knocked on our door just after 10, still in her field jacket, boots caked in red clay. She asked if Lily had said anything new. Not questions, she said. Patterns, repeated phrases, recurring names, anything that pointed to familiarity. She seemed especially interested in the dog's behavior. I told her about Rusty's fixation on the side yard, the way he'd whine and scratch if we didn't let him out before bed. She just nodded and jotted something down. The next morning, Lily came running in, phone in hand. "Rusty's gone," she said, breath short. She'd checked the GPS tracker we clipped to his collar after the first incident. The icon was blinking in panic range. He'd slipped through the broken fence slat into Delacroix's yard. Cole and I looked at each other, then ran out without thinking. The sun hadn't even burned off the morning fog. We followed the signal past Delacroix's garage and into the far corner of his backyard where an old cedar tree leaned against a garden shed. The door was ajar. Not wide, just cracked enough to make your mouth go dry. The air inside was stale. Dust clung to everything. Shelves lined the walls, rows of labeled cubbies organized by year. The labels started back in 2001. At first I thought they were just old art supplies, paper wheels, poster board. But then I saw it. A small metal box dented on one side sitting on the workbench where Rusty was pawing and growling. Lily picked it up. The latch stuck, but Max, who always had a screwdriver in his pocket, popped it loose. And inside was a kind of silence I won't forget. Baby teeth in plastic bags, hair ribbons pinned to cards with initials, bicycle license plates worn from time, everything tagged in tiny, careful handwriting. Lily picked up one card. MB, purple ribbon. She didn't speak. She just held it in her hands like it might burn if she dropped it. A floorboard creaked behind us. We turned. Delacroix was standing in the doorway, blocking the light. His voice came low and smooth. "Looking for treasure, kiddos." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Lily slammed the lid shut, and I told the kids we were leaving. I said something about chasing Rusty and how we'd keep him out of the shed next time. Delacroix didn't raise his voice. Just walked us out, still holding the box. Before he shut the door behind us, he rested his hand on Rusty's head and said, "Good boy." Then he latched the slat from his side with a bent nail. Lily hit the panic button on her phone as soon as we crossed the fence line. Harper showed up 12 minutes later. No lights, no siren. She stepped inside with her badge out, calm but alert. I showed her the direction we'd come from and described the shed, the box, the shelving. She kept her tone steady, but her mouth had tightened. I remember her saying, "We'll get the warrant, but it'll take time, and he's not going to leave that box out in the open again." Then she crouched next to Lily and asked if she'd touched anything. Lily pulled something from her hoodie pocket, a baby tooth sealed in plastic. Just one. She hadn't told me she'd taken it. Harper looked at the enamel under the lab lights later that day. Said it came from a 7-year-old girl. The tag on it read KDT. It matched a missing child case from 2019. A girl named Kelsey Tran from Oak Ridge County. Harper called it then serial. No more debate. By the time we got the full search warrant, the shed was empty. Harper pushed for expedited lab testing, pulled property records, and started building a connection. Every house that had ever turned up near one of these child disappearances had passed through the same real estate agency, Wilder Heritage Realty. Same flipping cycle. Same fast turnaround. Same paperwork signed by one man, Grant Wilder. Harper pulled his DMV photo and matched it against old surveillance footage from our porch camera. Different profile, different walk, but the same limp. Left knee stiff, old college injury still visible. The man who'd passed us in the night wasn't Delacroix. It was him. They started round-the-clock surveillance after that. Parked a van 2 houses down with cameras trained on Delacroix's yard. Harper waited and waited. The next night, they watched him haul 2 garbage bags into his trunk drive to a chain-link gate across town and toss them into a construction dumpster. Inside were bleach-soaked quilts, newspaper clippings of missing children, and 3 more metal boxes. Older artifacts, each tied to a missing child case from a different year, different town. The oldest dated back to 2001. The newest article had been printed the day Maline's remains were identified. By then it was no longer a question of if. It was how far it went, and how long he'd been doing it. It was Lily who noticed it first. We were sitting on the porch steps one evening watching the light drain from the sky when she said it quietly, almost like a thought she hadn't meant to say out loud. Rusty only growls when the lights are off. I didn't respond right away. Just looked out at the yard, which still bore the scars of crime scene tape and floodlights, even though they'd all been cleared a week earlier. She was right. Every time the porch light flicked off, even for a second, Rusty would pace, low to the ground alert, but only when it was dark. I jotted it down in the back of the grocery list I kept clipped to the fridge. At that point, I was writing everything down. Nothing felt small anymore. That weekend, Harper stopped by again. She looked tired. She always did. But there was a heaviness to her posture this time, like whatever she'd been waiting for still hadn't arrived. She sat at our breakfast table while Lily showed her the notebook, the maps, the time logs, even the sketch of the shed with the labeled cubbies. Harper didn't dismiss any of it. She listened like it mattered. Then she opened her own case file and pulled out something new. A sales deed. It was from the house 2 doors down. Closed 3 years earlier. Fast flip. Handled by the same realty company that had moved our house. Wilder Heritage. Harper circled the seller's signature, Grant Wilder. She told us he'd quietly acquired 3 other homes in the county. All had been sold within 26 months. All had a history that tied back to missing children. It was the first time I heard her say the word pattern out loud. Procurement and preservation. That's how she described it. One man found the property, the other stashed the memory. They worked in tandem, but never close enough to raise suspicion. Every child vanished during summer break or weekends when families let their guards down. Every burial was shallow, temporary almost, like they expected to come back. That night, Mia and Cole barely spoke at dinner. Lily kept one hand resting on Rusty's back the whole time. And when I stepped outside to take out the trash, I noticed something strange near the garden bed. Just a glint at first low to the ground. I brushed away some mulch and saw a bit of plastic, the corner of a tarp, buried shallow under the soil. I didn't dig. I just flagged it with a stake and sent Harper a message. The next morning, her team was out before sunrise. They peeled back the dirt carefully. The tarp was commercial grade, still bearing the label of a garden supply chain. Printed across the edge was a sunburst logo and the words, Spring Sale 2017. Inside, wrapped in plastic sheeting and packed in clay, was the skeleton of a second child. Smaller than Malene. Long bones not yet separated. Beads of a stretchy plastic bracelet clung to what remained of the wrist. This wasn't a cold case anymore. It was layered, active, ongoing. Harper stood beside Dr. Vowles at the edge of the excavation, her arms crossed, watching as they removed the bundle. That bag, she said, pointing to the tarp, was manufactured 4 years ago. Vowles confirmed the timeline. The second victim, female, maybe 5 or 6, had been buried well after Malene. Whoever did this came back to the same yard. That detail stuck with me longer than anything else. Not the tarp, not the bones, just the idea that someone returned to that spot dug in the same ground and placed another child underneath, like it was nothing. Harper updated her command log with calm efficiency, but I could see the shift in her face. Something had snapped into focus. She started requesting surveillance vans, drone support, staggered night patrols. But she didn't make arrests. Not yet. Without physical evidence tying the men to the bodies, she couldn't risk a premature move. Especially not with Delaqua's public image retired teacher neighborhood favorite, no priors. And Wilder Slippery, well-connected, always just a step ahead of the paperwork. If either of them got wind of what was coming, they'd disappear before the ink dried. I didn't sleep much that week. None of us did. I kept finding Lily in the hallway at night listening to the creaks in the floorboards. She'd jot something down in the notebook, then go back to bed without a word. The notebook had grown thicker, more pages, more drawings, more names. One entry stood out. Rusty growled at fence, 9:04 p.m. Light off. That line had 3 underlines. Cole installed motion-triggered lights around the yard. Flood lamps, harsh ones, the kind that made the lawn look like a construction site. It wasn't for show. It was bait. Harper coordinated with her team to elevate visibility on purpose. She wanted the suspects to think we were prepping for a new dig, something high profile. The pressure would force a mistake, and that mistake came 3 nights later. It was close to 9:30 when I spotted the SUV. Silver late model, no plates visible. It rolled past the end of the street once, then again. Slower the second time. Cole was in the garage. Lily and Max were already in bed. I texted Harper. Suspicious vehicle circling, lights off, same as last week. She replied in under 2 minutes, tracker active. Don't engage, let it play. Later that night, surveillance footage showed the same SUV pulling into a strip mall on the edge of town. A figure climbed out, tall, lean, left knee stiff. The limp was unmistakable. He opened the trunk and removed a canvas duffel heavy enough to sag. Minutes later, a second car arrived. Delacqua, dressed down. Windbreaker zipped to the collar. No conversation, just a quick exchange. The bag went from Wilder's hands to his. Then they both drove off opposite directions. Harper watched from the surveillance van, jaw tight. The camera had caught it all, duffel handoff timing. But it wasn't enough to arrest. The bag's contents were still unknown. Chain of custody hadn't been broken. She needed them to make one wrong move. I didn't hear about the full surveillance results until the next morning. But I knew something had changed. Rusty wouldn't leave the back door. He sat pressed to the glass ears, pricked forward, body low quiet. He wasn't barking anymore. He was waiting. The morning after the duffel bag exchange, the weight of everything seemed to settle across the house like fog. I'd walk into a room and forget why I'd come in. Cole barely touched his coffee. Lily had stopped talking altogether unless it was to Rusty. Even Max, who usually couldn't sit still, spent hours with his drone kit just tightening screws that didn't need it. We all felt it, whatever was coming next wasn't far. And Harper knew it too. She came by again this time, not for a debrief or a timeline, but to plant something small and deliberate. A fingernail-sized tracker. She slipped it into my palm like it was a cough drop and said, "If Wilder returns to your property, we need eyes, not guesses." That afternoon, she dressed down, borrowed a realtor badge from a contact, and showed up at one of Wilder's open houses on the other side of the county. Slack's fake lanyard phone recording from her pocket. I never heard exactly what was said, but I knew she was laying the groundwork for what would come next. That night, she planted the tracker on the underside of his SUV, just above the tailgate seam. She didn't wait for a warrant. Couldn't. Not if they were going to stop him before another child went missing. For 3 days, the tracker showed nothing. He drove his usual loops, office, gym, hardware store. He even stopped for frozen yogurt one afternoon. But on the 4th night, he did something different. Around 1:00 a.m., the dot on Harper's screen circled Woodbine Court. He didn't park. just rolled slow around the cul-de-sac, then left. She didn't intervene, just logged the route and let him go. A second night, same thing. And then a third. Always the same hour, always the same slow crawl past our house. It wasn't aimless, it was measured, watching for patterns, testing response times. She called it pre-contact behavior, the kind you don't notice until something breaks. Harper didn't wait. She escalated lighting across the entire block. Every house received a letter from the department. Increased visibility recommended during ongoing forensic reevaluation. But that wasn't the reason. She was baiting him, making him think something big was about to happen. That if he didn't move now, whatever he'd buried might resurface without him. The next evening around 6:30, I noticed the work truck. It pulled up to the curb, slow quiet. Lettering on the side read, "Metro Gas Leak Response." A man climbed out in a reflective vest, hard hat, and blue coveralls. I didn't recognize him at first. His jaw was clean-shaven eyes obscured by mirrored safety glasses. But the limp left knee stiff gave him away before he even reached the porch. I watched through the peephole as he rang the bell clipboard in one hand, handheld sniffer in the other. My phone was already in my palm. I typed the phrase Harper told me to send if anything felt off. Rusty smells gas. When I opened the door, I kept the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked. His smile didn't crack. "Evening, ma'am. Routine inspection. We've had some pressure chatter on the line beneath this street. I just need to run diagnostics. Standard protocol." I looked down at the spade strapped to his hip. "That for diagnostics, too." He chuckled. "Only if I hit a spike." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told him I needed a few minutes to get my family out of the house. He nodded, stepped back. "No open flames outside while we're working," he added. "Just in case." I shut the door and locked it. Cole was already standing in the foyer, eyes wide. I mouthed, "It's him." He moved without needing instructions, grabbed the go bag we kept by the garage door. Lily clutched Rusty's collar, heart hammering beneath her jacket. Max slipped on his sneakers without a word. I herded them toward the back slider, moving slow, stalling, giving Harper time. But we couldn't wait long. He was in the house now, walking the hall like it belonged to him, mumbling about lines and meters. Then Lily did something I didn't expect. She reached under Rusty's collar, unclipped the GPS tag, and pressed the panic button. It chirped once, sharp and soft. The icon on Harper's screen lit up red. Outside, Wilder circled toward the backyard, walking with purpose now. No more performance. He crossed the grass in long strides, ignoring the keep-out tape still wrapped around the old excavation site. Rusty bolted through the open slider, barking, hard teeth bared. Wilder didn't flinch, just knelt at the edge of the trench and started to dig. His movements were frantic, not careful. He was looking for something specific. A jar, maybe. Or evidence he'd meant to retrieve and never did. When Harper cleared the hedge line, her silhouette cut sharp against the floodlights. "Police," she called out. "Grant, step away. Hands where I can see them." He didn't. He turned, pulling Lily tight against his side with one arm. In the other, he held something small, glass coated in mud. It looked like a jar filled with jewelry, or what was left of it. "Stay back," he said. "I didn't do it. I was just the shovel. He made me." Harper didn't raise her voice. She didn't draw her weapon. She just stepped forward, slow, palms out. "Let the girl go. You're not going anywhere. We have eyes on Delacqua. You're the only one still on the board." Wilder looked at the jar, then back at Harper. "If that bracelet surfaces," he said, "I rot forever." Then he swung the shovel at her sharp and low. It clipped her shoulder hard enough to drop her to one knee. But she didn't let go of her weapon. She came up fast, tackled him full force. They hit the ground in a tangle of mud and breath and broken glass. Rusty lunged, clamping his teeth into Wilder's calf, pulling him sideways. Lily scrambled free. I pulled her into my arms, held her so tight I couldn't tell where her shaking ended and mine began. Harper pinned his wrist to the ground, cuffed him in one smooth motion. "Grant Wilder, you're under arrest for the murder of Malene Brooks and others yet to be identified. You have the right to remain silent." Her voice never shook, not once. Patrol arrived seconds later. 2 cruisers, lights off. Quiet. Fast. Officers fanned out, securing the yard, collecting the jar, tagging evidence. In the glare of the flood lamps, you could see the glitter of tiny charms, rubber bands, earrings, plastic beads, things no one would have noticed unless they'd been looking. But we were looking now. Across town, Delacroix made his own mistake. Surveillance had him boxed in. His sedan skidded into a mailbox, trying to avoid a roadblock. When they pulled him from the car, he was carrying a chemical-soaked duffel bag. Inside were 3 infant-sized knit caps preserved in pink-stained fluid. No excuses, no confusion, just trophies, fresh ones. That night, our street stayed lit until sunrise. The evidence team worked quiet, methodical. And as they packed up the last bag, Harper stood on our porch, her shoulder wrapped in gauze, watching the final jar being sealed. She didn't say anything, just nodded once, eyes steady. We didn't know yet how far it would go, how many more would be found. But we knew something had finally broken open. And this time we weren't burying it. The hardest part wasn't hearing the truth. It was watching them say it like it was just business. Like the past 16 months had been a brief inconvenience, they were finally ready to sweep into order. Maggie went first. Not because she felt guilt, she didn't. It was because Harper sat across from her with a recorder already running, her case files spread open like pages from a play Maggie had starred in. The room was bare except for 2 chairs, a table, and the scent of stale coffee clinging to cinder block. She didn't ask for a lawyer. Said she just wanted it out there. Said she was tired of being treated like a sidekick. "I was the one who got the ball rolling," she said. Evan just panicked halfway through. She laid it all out. The phone calls, the meetings at that storage unit off Route 3. How she found out about the updated will in the first place by listening through the vent outside Dad's study. She said Harold had planned to tell me after the holidays, but Evan convinced him to wait until spring. By then they figured I'd be too busy with work to care about the shift in assets. But he didn't wait, Maggie said. He started moving money. He was going to cut us out of everything. Me and Evan both. Just leave us scraps. When Harper asked what scraps meant, Maggie didn't flinch. Less than $100,000 each. The rest was going to Caleb, and some to a local land trust for conservation. Can you believe that dirt over blood? It wasn't the money. Or at least not just the money. Maggie said it was the insult. The feeling of being erased. She'd spent years bending over backwards trying to look like the daughter Evelyn always wanted. Church events, potlucks, smile-tight hair neat. Meanwhile, I was the one they chose to keep around. And Evan, he'd been drifting ever since his DUI. He had nothing but debt and a garage full of tools he didn't know how to use. We were drowning, Maggie said. And they wanted to hand you a lifeboat while we sank. The plan came together in pieces. At first it was just intimidation. Shake Harold up, maybe get him to reconsider the will. But it didn't work. He stood firm. So they took it further. They faked an anonymous threat, something about a land dispute. Left it on the windshield of Harold's truck in red ink. Still no reaction. That's when Maggie made the call. She reached out to someone she called a friend from before. At first, Harper thought she meant an old classmate. Then Maggie said his name, Donnie Reiser. That hit like a dropped brick. Reiser was a name that had come up before years back in connection with a string of extortion cases in Illinois. Never charged, never caught. Just a whisper with a record that never quite stuck. Maggie said she met him through a boyfriend in college. He'd been useful once or twice, helped her scare off a landlord who wouldn't return her deposit. She thought he was just a fixer, but he had a different plan this time. Said he could clean things up permanently. That's when she should have backed out. But she didn't. The night Harold and Evelyn went missing, it wasn't Evan who lured them out. It was Maggie. She told them Caleb had called and sounded off. Said I'd gotten into something dangerous out in Oklahoma. They left the house in a panic. She tracked their car, fed Reiser their route, then disappeared from the narrative like she'd never been involved. Evan's part came later. He helped get rid of the van. Said he thought it was just a scare tactic. But by the time he saw the blood in the trunk liner, it was too late. Maggie said he cried. Not for them, she clarified. For himself. Because he knew he couldn't undo it. When Harper asked where the bodies were, Maggie didn't blink. I don't know, she said. Reiser handled that part. We didn't ask questions, just waited for confirmation they wouldn't be found. She said it like someone describing a dropped shipment. No grief, no doubt, just cold arithmetic. Evan broke 2 days later. Harper sat across from him in the holding cell, a legal pad untouched between them. He looked thinner than I remembered, hollow even. His first words were, I didn't kill them, I just cleaned up after her. He didn't try to paint Maggie as a monster. Didn't deny anything either. Just admitted his part with the kind of numbness that made your stomach turn. He said Reiser gave them each a task. Maggie handled the planning, Evan helped with disposal. But what made Harper stop writing was the last thing he said. There was someone else, he whispered. Someone who watched. I don't know his name, but Reiser called him the Shadow. Said he was insurance, in case we talked. That name changed everything. Harper pulled every string she had trying to trace it. The Shadow wasn't in any file, wasn't linked to Reiser directly. But when Harper dug through an old DEA archive from a joint op in Missouri, one note stood out. A photo, grainy, time-stamped 2003. 3 men in a diner booth. Reiser, a known trafficker, and an unidentified male with a half-burned face and a ring on his index finger that bore a Twin Hawk emblem. Harper froze. That same emblem had been etched into the clasp of Evelyn's necklace, the one they never recovered. She'd worn it every Sunday for years. That's when it hit Harper. The third man wasn't just insurance. He was the handler, and he'd been close to Evelyn, possibly even before she married Harold. A college photo surfaced from a yearbook scanned online. Evelyn smiling arm in arm with a tall man in ROTC fatigues. His face was blurred in print, but the ring caught the light. Same emblem. Harper sent it through facial match. No hits, nothing in the system. Whoever he was, he'd erased himself years ago. But that raised a different question. Was this just about inheritance? Or had Evelyn brought something or someone dangerous into the family long before Maggie or I were even born? And if so, was the will really the trigger? Or just the excuse? As the pieces settled, Harper met with the state prosecutor. Maggie would face trial. Evan would likely cut a deal. But Reiser and the third man were still out there. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't finished. Not yet. The trial began on a Monday morning in mid-May. Sky was overcast, pale gray like unpolished stone, and the whole town felt quieter than usual. Even the courthouse lawn, usually busy with foot traffic and bird song, felt hushed like the air itself didn't want to disturb what was about to unfold. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution table. No press, no cameras, just folding chairs, water pitchers, and the creak of wooden benches when people shifted their weight. Maggie walked in with her hair pulled back tight, no jewelry, no expression. Evan came next, flanked by deputies. He didn't look at me, but his jaw kept working like he had something stuck in his teeth. The courtroom didn't need noise. It breathed tension all on its own. The state laid out its case with the kind of precision that only comes from knowing you have most of the truth. Harper's investigation had paid off. They had phone records, burner texts, security footage of Maggie meeting Donnie Reiser at the gas station outside Fairview, even financial logs that showed 2 unexplained wire transfers sent to a now deactivated account. Evan's plea deal meant he'd testify, but even without him, Maggie didn't stand a chance. Her fingerprints were on the will documents Harold had locked away, a scratch of her handwriting on the storage unit lease, and a voicemail she didn't know she left recorded by mistake while arguing with Reiser in the parking lot of a motel. You could hear her voice say, clear as a bell, "No blood." We agreed no blood. That one played like a funeral bell. Evan took the stand on the 3rd day. He didn't dress it up, just told it straight. Said he thought it would be a scare job, make Harold panic, force him to change the will back. But when he saw the trunk, the blood, the trash bags, he said he realized too late he was part of something that couldn't be undone. "Didn't kill them," he said again, voice thin. But I didn't stop it either. And I sure as hell helped cover it. When the prosecutor asked who gave the final order, Evan hesitated, looked right at Maggie. "She told me it was done," he said, like she was telling me dinner was ready. Maggie didn't testify. Her attorney didn't argue innocence either. He leaned into mental strain, claimed years of family neglect, favoritism, unresolved trauma. Said Harold had manipulated her for decades, promised her trust, and handed it to me. Said Evelyn made her feel like a shadow in her own home. But it didn't change the facts. She planned it. She watched it unfold. She never called for help, never even hesitated when the cover-up began. When the verdict came down guilty on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, she didn't cry. Just pressed her lips together like she was holding in a yawn. The sentence came 2 weeks later. Evan got 15 years with parole eligibility in 6. Maggie got life, no parole. Harper was there for both. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just took it in, then quietly left before the press could catch up. But something stayed with her, something she said later over coffee. This wasn't just about inheritance, she told me. Maggie hated them long before the will ever changed. Then she paused. But the 3rd man, the one Reiser called the Shadow, he's still out there, and he knew Evelyn. 2 months after the trial, a storage locker was discovered in Greenville, rented under an alias tied to Reiser. Inside were 2 boxes, one filled with VHS tapes, the other with labeled binders. Harper got the call first. She reviewed them in a secured room at the field office, and what she found cracked the silence we thought we'd sealed. One of the tapes showed Evelyn, young, maybe mid-20s, sitting at a table with 2 men. One was clearly Reiser, much younger, no beard yet. The other, the one with the hawk emblem ring, stood behind her hand on her shoulder. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. The date stamp said 1983. That changed the entire timeline. That man wasn't just a ghost from her past, he was part of something deeper. Harper pulled Evelyn's old teaching records, scanned every employment history loan application, even high school yearbooks. One photo finally caught something, a faded snapshot from a teacher training seminar. Same man, same ring. Name on the tag, Carl Strickland. No other records. But now we had a face. And a name. An interagency request brought up a hit. Strickland was a known associate of several missing persons cases in the early 90s. Always just peripheral, always one layer removed. Never charged, never even detained. But his name showed up in a redacted FBI memo from 1995 that labeled him as non-active asset potential handler class. We didn't know what that meant exactly, but it wasn't good. I flew out to the last known address tied to him, a burned-out property outside Helena, Arkansas. Nothing but charred beams, moss-eaten stone, and a mailbox half sunk in mud. Local records showed the fire happened in 2002. No injuries, no insurance claim. Just vanished. Harper said it looked staged, said it felt like he'd erased the last breadcrumb on purpose. But one thing bothered her if Evelyn knew who he was. Why didn't she say anything? Why keep him near? We still don't know what hold he had on her, or if Harold ever knew. But what's clear now is this: the murders weren't just an act of greed. They were the final chapter in a book that started long before I ever became a Rusk, and someone else helped write it. The authorities closed the Rusk file as a solved double homicide. Maggie and Evan were behind bars. Harper transferred to a different district, and I kept the house, renovated the kitchen, donated Harold's library to the local college. I kept Evelyn's sewing machine, though. Can't bring myself to get rid of it. Sometimes I find a needle still threaded like she just stepped away for a minute. But even now, when the wind hits a certain pitch at night, I swear I can hear tires on gravel. A van door sliding shut. A ring tapping quietly against glass. Like something or someone is reminding me this isn't quite over yet. The Rusk property is quiet now. The garden Evelyn once tended with so much care has gone wild along the edges, lilies pushing through weeds, vines curling around the porch rails. I haven't touched them. I let them grow the way she would have wanted, untamed but alive. The front door still creaks when it opens, same as it did when I was 16, and Harold first handed me a spare key. Back then I didn't know what that gesture meant. Now I do. He wasn't just letting me in. He was trusting me with everything. I kept going to the sheriff's office for a while, helping Harper sort through the leftover files tied to Donnie Reiser and Strickland. But eventually, even she had to let it go. The agency closed out the search on Strickland as inactive, presumed dead. No body, no proof. Just a box of tapes, a scorched foundation, and a trail that vanished like smoke. Harper said goodbye the way she always did, direct, no fuss. She left me a manila folder labeled Loose Ends with one line circled in red. No clean ending, only clearer questions. Evan writes letters from prison, about once every 2 months. I read them, but I don't always reply. He talks a lot about regret, about how things spiraled. He says he was weak, that Maggie manipulated him. Maybe that's true, but weakness doesn't absolve you. Maggie hasn't reached out, and I doubt she ever will. Last I heard, she spends her days in a prison library folding paper cranes from torn-out catalog pages. Part of me wonders if she remembers Mom's favorite poem, the one about birds flying home. But that part stays quiet. What sticks with me most isn't the trial, or the lies, or even the night I found the safe empty. It's a moment I can't explain. Weeks after everything ended, I was sitting in Harold's old chair in the study, just thinking. The house was silent. Windows open, rain just starting to fall. And I swear I heard Evelyn's voice, soft, distant, say my name. Not a whisper. Not in my head. Just present. For a breath or two. Like something left behind hadn't quite let go. I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in grief. And sometimes grief sounds like someone you miss saying your name one last time. I still don't know what Strickland was to her. A threat. A mistake. A secret Harold never uncovered. All I know is that whatever power he once held died with the people who carried it. And I'm not going to give it new life by chasing shadows. I've seen what that kind of obsession does. It eats you from the inside out. Some nights I walk the halls of the house with the lights off, just letting my footsteps echo through the quiet. I find comfort in the stillness, in the way the air feels heavier where love once lived. Not perfect love, but real love. Complicated, flawed, and human. The kind you only recognize after it's gone. If you've listened this far, thank you. I told this story because some truths shouldn't get buried no matter how deep the lies run. Maybe you've lived through something like this. Maybe you've seen a family fall apart from the inside. If so, I hope you found something here that made you feel less alone. And if this story stayed with you, consider sharing it so no name gets forgotten and no silence gets the last word.